How's it going, everybody? Today we're going to be looking at a couple of different torque wrenches in the sort of upper range of the price point. And we're talking here about some pretty expensive stuff. We're going to be looking at two torque wrenches, which are both upwards of $200, the latter of which is close to $300. And the question is, what do you really get when you spend that much money? And more importantly, should you spend that much money on a torque wrench? So in order to kind of figure that out, we're going to compare these two kind of upper end torque wrenches to two of the best torque wrenches in our sort of mid-range test that we did on our last video, which I'll post up here, or up here. I always forget which hand to use. So we're going to be looking at two torque wrenches in that sort of high-end luxury price point, and we'll be comparing them to two wrenches in the sort of mid-range, prosumer level around the $100 range. And so we're gonna try to figure out, do you get more by spending 2 or 3 times as more as those sort of mid-range prosumer ones? So let's meet our torque wrenches we'll be looking at today. First, let's look at our sort of prosumer models we'll be looking at, and then we'll look at our luxury models that we'll be comparing them to. So the two torque wrenches we'll be looking at today in the prosumer level are the Park Tool TW 5.2 and the Feedback Sports range. Now these two torque wrenches are often compared to each other as sort of like the best at this price point. The Park Tool is about $90 for just the wrench, and the Feedback costs $120, but it comes with a set of hex bits to go along with it. These two are often considered to be sort of the best value for a torque wrench, right? This is often found in professional bike shops, and the Feedback has been seen as sort of this up-and-comer new model that a lot of people actually say beats out the Park Tool in a head-to-head comparison. Now, in my mid-range prosumer torque wrench video, we talked about how the Feedback is probably the better torque wrench of the two, but the Park Tool is still probably better used for a professional setting, like in a bike shop, given the fact that it offers calibration services, whereas this one does not. But these are two very good torque wrenches, regardless of which one you choose, and they will ultimately do the job of torquing down your bolts to the right torque setting. However, these are definitely not the most expensive torque wrenches you can buy. There's actually plenty of torque wrenches above the $120 mark, and we're gonna try to figure out today whether or not you should be spending more money and whether or not you'll get more if you do spend that money. So the torque wrenches that we'll be comparing to these two models both come from the same brand, a brand called Effetto Mariposa. Effetto Mariposa means butterfly effect in Spanish, but it's actually a Swiss brand that has their tools manufactured in Italy. So you get a little bit of the whole range of international flavors here, if you will. And we'll be looking at their sort of budget model, the Effetto Mariposa Giusta Forza 1-8, seen here, and then their top of the line model, the Giusta Forza 2-16 Pro. And so we'll be trying to figure out whether or not these two luxury torque wrenches, this one costing about $200, this one close to $300, whether or not these are worth your hard-earned money. Are you actually getting more for the money in comparison to the ones that are, somewhere between a half to even a third of the price of these super high-end torque wrenches? So what we're gonna do to figure this out is we're gonna first do a little bit of a close-up, hands-on review of each of the torque wrenches. I'll show you how they work. I'll highlight some features I like, as well as nitpick some things I don't like about them. Then we're gonna go over the results of some tests I did with all 4 of these torque wrenches. We'll talk about the accuracy, we'll talk about the volume of the click itself, and then we'll talk about their ability to get into tight spaces in order to torque down bolts properly, even if they are in an area that's hard to get a wrench into. Once we do all of that, we'll come back over here, and then I'll tell you my opinion as to whether or not it's worth spending more money to get one of these super high-end torque wrenches, and if so, which of these two is best for you. Stay tuned, let's head over to the workbench, take a look at these torque wrenches in a little bit more detail, and then we'll come back here and try to answer our question. Okay, so let's compare our two prosumer torque wrenches to our two luxury torque wrenches over here, starting off with the prosumer side. So let's start off with the cheapest torque wrench in our test, which is the Park Tool TW 5.2. Comes in a hard plastic carrying case. Here is the wrench itself. So unlike the other wrenches here, this one has a 3/8 inch drive head, which is a little bit frustrating in my opinion, because I don't think you need a 3/8 inch drive head for such a small torque wrench. Push to release, push right here and it releases the socket. You have a reverse switch right here. range of 2 to 14 Newton meters, and you can see here on this window where the red line matches up, that's where you're at. And to adjust the torque, you push up on this release knob, dial in what you want, and then let go. Now, it is a little bit also annoying because, so I'm at 4 right now. If I want to go to 5, you would think that there'd be a 1 here, but there isn't. So you either have 0.8 or you have 1.2, so you got to kind of find the middle, and that's about 1, but it would have been nice to have just, 1, 2, whatever. That is the Park Tool TW 5.2. You have a Newton meter to inch pound conversion scale on the back here, which is a nice touch. And it overall feels like a very well-built tool. Plastic handle, which is a little bit cheap feeling compared to a metal handle, but it does feel good for a plastic handle, if that makes sense. And then to release, just push in, release, there you go. And that is the Park Tool TW 5.2. All right, so next up, let's take a look here at the Feedback Sports Range Torque Wrench. So you get a sort of tool wrap rather than a hard plastic case. I would have preferred a hard plastic case in terms of storage, but the tool wrap is still pretty well thought out. You have this internal sort of Velcro pocket, and then it reveals the torque wrench as well as the included bits. So you get a full set of bits here, which go from 2 to 8 for a hex, including a 2.5, and then you have a T10, a T25, and a T30. And then you also get 3 extended length bits over here as well. And then here we have the actual torque wrench itself. Now the torque wrench is well manufactured. It feels really solid, nice, kind of shiny, and it just feels good, right? It's kind of hard to explain, but it feels like a premium product. The head is ratcheting, and you have a switch here on the back, as you can see here. This uses a hex insert rather than an actual 1/4 inch drive. So essentially you would take one of your bits and then they just go in here like so, and it is magnetic, so it clicks into place there pretty securely and doesn't rattle out, which is nice. To adjust the torque, so first of all, you have a range of 2 to 14 Newton meters, and you have the even numbers on one side and then the odd numbers on the other side. And then you twist this little silver knurled knob here at the bottom, and you'll see a little silver kind of sliding, I don't know what to call it, but this silver part starts to go up, as you can see here. I'll go up a little bit, it's more obvious. So you can see here that silver marker. And the one gripe I have with this system is that you don't really know, like, do you need to put it right beneath the number, the line for the number, or do you want to put it right at there and even it up? It's unclear exactly where you need to place this little silver dial, and depending on the angle which you look at it, it's kind of hard to tell exactly where you're at. So that is one gripe I have. But the actual mechanism here feels really solid and positive. All the clicks feel really nice. It feels like a very well machined adjuster knob here. I am a little bit concerned about the open spring design here. You see the spring here that actually adjusts the tension on the head. You can access it from both sides, and so I'd be a little bit concerned about whether or not gunk or dust would get into here and kind of, gunk this up over time. So for long-term, durability, that is a question, although I guess if you keep it in the tool wrap, you should be able to avoid that altogether. But all in all, a really nice sort of high quality tool. And again, this is the $120 range, right? This is not the super luxury high-end stuff. So what do you really get by spending close to double, if not close to triple as much for a higher end torque wrench, if this is already a really solid torque wrench that performs well and feels really solid? Next up, we have our Effetto Mariposa Giusta Forza 1 to 8. Now, this is the standard model. It comes with just the torque wrench, not the bits included. The one with the bits comes with a tool wrap similar to the Feedback. Instead, this one comes in this sort of, I wouldn't call it a hard plastic case, but a plastic case, and you sort of push the top off, revealing the torque wrench inside, and you have some documentation here with the sort of calibration specifications and stuff like that. So here it is. This is the Giusta Forza 1-8. And this costs $197 for just the wrench, or upwards of $230 for the wrench, including the bits. So this definitely is a much more expensive torque wrench than the feedback or the Park tool, considering that you only get this wrench, right? So what do you get by spending a lot of money? Well, first of all, this might sound like a drawback, but you have a range that goes from 1 to 8. Accurately measuring 1 Newton meter of force is really rather difficult. And so the fact that this can do it is pretty impressive. Now, there aren't a ton of things that need to be torqued down to 1 Newton meter, but there are some really high-end carbon fiber components that do use low torque, sometimes as low as 1 Newton meter. And so being able to go that low is kind of unique on this wrench. Rather than a ratcheting head, you have a fixed head, in which, again, you just insert a hex bit here. It is also magnetic, like the feedback. But without the ratcheting feature on the head here, they're able to essentially make this much smaller. And it has a sort of like flat top cutout here. And so you can really press it up against whatever you need to and get in some really tight to reach spaces. This is really one of the best options if you want to be able to get into anywhere on a bike where you might need to torque something down. You have this knurled section here along the window, and the knurling feels really, really precise, sharp, but not in like a negative way, kind of just like grippy. Like you feel the knurling, it has good grip, it doesn't cut into your hand or anything. And then to adjust the torque, what you do is you turn this knob here at the bottom, which again just feels super precise. And you can see this little black line here, and you match it up with the number that you want. And so you have your numbers here on the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 8. And then you have half numbers as well, and third numbers, I believe, is exactly what these different markings are. So you can be extremely precise with this torque wrench. And again, just the feeling of this, it's solid, it's heavy, like in a good way, turning the knob, right? You know exactly what you're doing, and it just feels so premium. You can tell a lot of thought was put into this, right? This really feels like a premium product. It feels like you got your money's worth, I have to say. That is the Giusta Forza 1 to 8 Newton meter. Again, fixed head, no ratcheting function, really nice loud click. And it's hard to explain how solid and premium this feels without holding it. All right, and then finally we have the Giusta Forza 2 to 16 Pro. Now this is the deluxe version, which comes with this metal case and the included bits. So you open it up, you get this, calibration certificate here and some instructions on how to use it. You have some foam padding to protect the contents, and then you have the actual torque wrench and the bits. So let's look at the bits first. So you get these standard size bits, and these are made of S2 tool steel, and I believe they are a HRC hardness of 62, if I'm not mistaken, which is really rather hard. So these bits are made of really high-end steel, so they should last a very long time without rounding anything out or anything like that. And you have some hex options here in the standard length, and then you have some Torx options, a few more Torx. You have 4. Then you also have a Phillips as well as a flathead. Okay. Then you have some extended bits down here. So you have the most common sizes. So you have some of the most common sizes. You have a 4mm hex, 5mm hex, and then a T25 Torx in this extended length size. And then you also have an extender with a bit holder, so you can use the other shorter bits with this as well, and this is magnetic. And so if you take one of your standard bits, place it in there, magnetic, fits in there nicely, so on and so forth. What's interesting though is that this torque wrench though actually takes a standard 1/4 inch drive socket. So you would have to use this little adapter to use it with the included bits. Now, I think this actually works out pretty well because you can use, other sockets if there's a different one you want to use, but you can still use these little bits here. These would work directly with the Giusta Forza 1 to 8, which has this fixed head, right? So if you want to just grab one of these bits. You just slide it in there. Again, magnetic, locks in there. You can use this guy. But for the 2 to 16, you have this 1/4 inch drive, so you can use it with standard sockets, right? Or you can use your adapter and you can use the bits that are included. To release the socket, you have this whole thing here, which is the button, which looks, again, it's just integrated very well, right? It doesn't sort of stick out like an obvious button. It sort of looks like it's part of the design here. So you just press on that, and this releases. And then this is a ratcheting head. It's also reversible. And to reverse it, you basically twist this whole black part here, and that's reversed now, like that. So that's one direction, that's the other direction. Really fine tooth count, right? You can get a really tight arc swing, like that's one click. That's another click. That's another one. So you can get in some really tight spaces, even with this one, even though it does have a wider head than the fixed head on the 1 to 8, right? This is wider, but because it has such a fine tooth ratcheting mechanism, you can still get in some pretty tight spaces and be pretty efficient with your ratcheting. This has the same sort of adjustment as the 1 to 8, as you can see here, except this one goes 2 to 16. You twist the dial at the bottom here, and then this adjusts up and down the torque range. You set what you want, and then same thing, you just go to spec, and you have a nice loud click as well too. This really does just feel super, super premium compared to some of the other torque wrenches that we've been looking at. I mean, like I said, the knurling feels so precise, so smooth, right? You know, sharp in a good way. Again, like I said, for the other Giusta Forza, the metal just feels, it just feels good. I don't know what else to say. It's a beautiful piece of machinery. It's really well thought out. It's really well executed. It's just really beautiful. Now, does this operate significantly better than the feedback or the park tool? No, not really, right? You're gonna do the same thing with it, but this does feel like an heirloom quality tool, something that you're, looking forward to using, you're proud to have. You can just feel the quality when you're holding it. That's not to say the other ones don't feel quality, but this really is another level of quality. Again, between these two, right, you do see the difference here of the fixed head. They also make this 2 to 16 with a fixed head, the non-pro version, instead of the ratcheting head, which if you're looking to get into small, tight to reach spaces, that may be a better solution. I ended up getting both. So I have the fixed head and I have the ratcheting. You will notice here there's a slight difference in colors. This one I bought new and it's much more of a dark red, as you can see. Whereas the Pro I bought used and it's a little bit more faded. Now I don't know if that's something to do with it being left out in the sun by the previous owner, or maybe, some sort of exposure to oils or chemicals or something, I don't know, or maybe if they actually changed the color. But that is just something to note. It is pretty uniformly worn down, so I don't really know if that's actually, a wear thing. Maybe this actually was made a more sort of like purplish red rather than this bright red. So it may just be that this is an older model from a different time period. But that is just something to note. All right, so this new one that I bought was much darker red than this one, but there hasn't been any scratching on it at all, right? The paint still feels really good. It really is just a super premium product, and I really enjoy it. All right, so there we have it. We have our prosumer torque wrenches. We have our luxury torque wrenches here, right? We got the feedback and the park tool on the prosumer side, and then we have our two Effetto Mariposa Giusta Forzas on the luxury side. Which one's right for you? Well, let's head back to our sort of workbench and we can talk about which one you might want to pick and whether or not it's worth spending more money on these luxury brands rather than the sort of prosumer models here from Park Tool and Feedback. So we've got prosumer on one hand, the feedback and the Park Tool, and we have our two high-end luxury torque wrenches here from Effetto Mariposa. Where should you spend your money? As usual, the answer is, it depends, but I can give some ideas as to who might choose which one. Just off the bat, are these two significantly more accurate than the cheaper prosumer models? No, not significantly. Now, at the lowest torque spec, the 1:8 Giusta Forza was the most accurate, but the fact that it barely beat out the feedback could be down to the fact that my testing equipment wasn't all that expensive. It probably wasn't the most accurate equipment in the world, so I think they're just about tied, even at that really low-end torque spec. So that out of the way, you're not gonna necessarily get better accuracy by spending $200 or $300 versus about $100, right? Now, for $100 versus the cheap stuff that's under $30, yes. And if you watch my sort of complete shootout video, which I'll link up here, you will see that the more expensive torque wrenches are more accurate than the cheapest one. However, I don't think you should be buying one of these torque wrenches just for the idea of accuracy alone. I think if you're gonna buy one of these two torque wrenches, it's gonna be for the following reasons. First of all, these torque wrenches are higher build quality. I have to say that. There is not a single piece of plastic on them, and they're still holding up just great, right? The paint is still in great condition, everything works, everything is sealed off the way it should be, and they offer calibration services from a couple different distributors, so either you can send them back to Effetto Mariposa in Switzerland, or there is a US retailer that will do calibration for you. So they'll last you a very long time, right? Build quality is high. They feel super premium, right? They're actually light, but they feel substantial, if that makes sense, right? They don't feel cheap. They don't feel flimsy. The feedback feels good too, but it just feels a little bit cheaper. I don't think it feels cheap, but it definitely doesn't feel quite as high quality as either of these two options. Actually, there is a third model in the lineup here. There is the Giusta Forza 2-16 non-Pro, which has the same range as the Pro here, 2-16 Newton meters, but it has the fixed head of the Giusta Forza 1-8. I think, honestly, that's probably the one you should go with, unless you really need the super low-end torque of the 1-8. The reason being is that the huge benefit of this one is that flat top head that's just really capable of getting into tight to reach spaces, which can make this a great tool for really high-end carbon fiber components. The click is loud, it's easy to set, it's precise to set. Like I said, you have great access to hard to reach spaces. This might be a reason to buy it. I have not found another torque wrench that offers the same ability to get into the most tight spaces possible. The Toe Peak torque stick, which I did review in my complete shootout, got pretty close to the Giusta Forza, but this one does take the cake with that sort of flat top fixed head. It really is the most compact torque wrench I can find. So you have better build quality with these luxury torque wrenches. I think if you get the fixed head, you do have that added ability to get into tight spaces. But I think ultimately the real only reason to spend $300 is because you want the craftsmanship of a $300 torque wrench. If you want something that's been made with no detail spared, right? Attention to detail in every single way. It was made to look beautiful, to work beautifully. Like it's a tool, but it's also kind of bling. You know what I mean? Like this was made to be something that you pick up and you're like, wow, this feels incredible. When I pick up either of these torque wrenches, like when I go into the bike shop, I'm like finding an excuse to torque down some bolts because I want to use these guys, right? They feel that good. I don't have that same feeling with the feedback and the park tool. And again, does that matter? Not really, right? You don't need to buy a torque wrench to make you want to use it. But I do think there's something to be said about sort of super high-end tools, right? There's a reason why companies like Effetto Mariposa or Abbey bike tools, there's a reason why people want to buy their stuff. It's because it's made by people who really care about the product and want to make the best possible product, even if it's going to cost you a little bit more. Is this going to be significantly better than the prosumer models? No, it's just not. It's not going to function significantly better. You can save money if you don't care about, having the nicest tools in the world or some sort of, super high-end luxury thing. Get the prosumer, get the feedback, get the park tool, get the Toe Peak. They're great. They'll do everything you need it to do, nothing more, nothing less. However, if you want an heirloom quality tool, something that you are happy to look at, that you look forward to using, that you can use for a lifetime, you can send off to get calibrated, you can pass it down to someone at some point. These are just incredible, honestly. I have to say that. They really do feel incredibly premium. They feel like tools. They're also meant to be beautiful. And I appreciate that. So I hope this video was helpful. we got to check out some expensive torque wrenches. We hopefully gave you some more information to try to figure out whether or not you should spend $200 or $300 on a torque wrench. Again, obviously these are luxuries. You don't need these, but they're pretty awesome. So you make the decision as to whether or not it's worth it for you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please consider subscribing if you haven't done so yet. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thank you again. See you later.